Alright guys, welcome back to F1 Drama. It's not just Mercedes that find themselves in crisis mode right now, with Ferrari in a similar boat after a disastrous race in Bahrain. Charles Leclerc apparently requesting an emergency meeting with Ferrari President John Elkann to express his disapproval with the way things are currently going at Ferrari. How much more of this can Leclerc take before he might decide to move on from the Scuderia? Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. On the verge of 18,000 subs as well. Love to see it. But Mercedes definitely in a difficult situation right now. They actually came out today with a message to their team, and I thought this got a lot of mixed reaction really. Some said, oh yeah, go Mercedes, like let's make the fight back and whatever, but a lot of people were like, hang on a second here, they came P5, P7, it's not exactly a disaster, but they've done quite the statement here, to be honest, in quite some detail, and we'll dive into it here. To our fans, Bahrain hurt every one of us, so, you know, seemingly admitting that the season's an absolute disaster, and they talk about here they want to fight back and all this stuff. We feel the same pain. What can we do about it? What will we do about it? They go on to say we're not going to panic, we're not going to make knee-jerk reactions. In a spotlight as fierce as Formula 1, people are quick to point fingers or look for scapegoats. They're not doing that because, of course, we know there's been quite some discussion in the last few days with regard to Mike Elliott, or the head of the technical team over there, and Mercedes say they aren't doing that. They aren't going to apportion blame to anyone. Of course, this is what they say publicly. We're working urgently and calmly to build our recovery plan, focusing on what needs to happen in the short, medium and long term to win, have developments in the pipeline for the next races. There will be more to come. No silver bullets in Formula 1 like the silver arrows used to be back in the day. Second, we'll keep our head held high, and they then go on to talk about the fact that people have been roasting them on Twitter. Basically, they say, you know, if you're offering criticism or support, there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. We want our online community to be a safe space full of healthy debate where we treat others and they are treated with respect, be they team members, Mercedes fans or rival fans. Zero tolerance policy on discrimination, abuse or bullying of any kind, which is all fair comments, and we take appropriate action to any comments or posts that do not meet our guidelines. So, you know, they're basically saying what they're planning to do and saying don't roast us too hard or scapegoat anyone on Twitter. So, I don't know, interesting statement. I know there was some mixed reaction to this because it was like, do Mercedes really need to do this? And I saw many Mercedes fans saying, like, don't just talk a good game, actually deliver a good game on track, right? Like, deliver the upgrades. Like, they can say all they want, right, and do all this nice speeches and all these nice posts on Twitter after, you know, at the end of the day, their car is way further behind than they want it to be, but it's not like they're in a McLaren situation, right? I mean, they were basically P19, P20 after a pretty disastrous Grand Prix there in Bahrain. Mercedes are in a position where they could still fight, but yet they're doing all these posts and stuff to their fans, which is understandable, but, you know, I can understand the mixed reaction to such a message. Now, Ferrari, though, are in arguably a more interesting and even worse predicament because they have members of their team straight up resigning from their posts. We saw the other day David Sanchez, head of their kind of aero department, he's resigned. Apparently, he's going to go back to McLaren, and many other figures that were seemingly not happy with Binotto getting replaced are also going to be on their way out from the team. We heard the rumours actually when Binotto was rumoured to be getting fired, effectively is what they did to him, despite the fact that he resigned, according to what they say publicly, that a lot behind the scenes were not happy that Binotto was going to get fired and actually were considering moving on themselves. So apparently Inaki Rueda and some others that have already left, and Sanchez has now resigned, and others are considering the same and have considered leaving Ferrari and have effectively been posting their CVs around to other teams as a result. That's leaving Vasseur in a tricky position. Now, we saw yesterday he's reportedly given the go-ahead to effectively replace some of these guys that either want to leave, and Vasseur's got the permission to say, yeah, you've got to go. Now, as I mentioned yesterday, should he not just have this permission anyway? Should this not be his decision rather than the guys even higher up than Vasseur himself? And some articles have suggested that actually Vasseur doesn't have all this permission that he wants from Vigna higher up, because, you know, this article describes, of course, this is translated from the original Italian, and, you know, the Italian press, you got to take a bit of a grain of salt with this stuff, but it describes a Ferrari powder keg. Another sensational case is breaking out. Vasseur is already fed up. The new team principal complains about his spaces that Vigna is limited in terms of like what he can actually do. Skip to protection of the engineers. No one feels safe anymore. So effectively saying that Vasseur doesn't feel like he quite has the control that he would like to have in terms of making changes, hiring and firing and this type of stuff. And some say that he does have the control, some say that he doesn't. Pretty difficult to say, but Vasseur already finding Ferrari a quite difficult challenge, as I'm sure he would have expected when going into the job. Everyone knows, bit of a poison challenge there at the Scuderia, and Vasseur is now learning that firsthand, it seems. Now, Charles Leclerc is also not happy, right? So we've got the engineers that are leaving, we've got aerodynamicists that are leaving, we've got, you know, Vasseur maybe not happy with how things are going internally, we've got certain key members deciding to just resign or dip out of there or join another team. Vasseur's got to rebuild at, in addition to trying to save their season. Of course, he says publicly that they're still in the championship fight, as they are. We're only race one, but it does feel like that Ferrari's fight is not going to be in a great spot, especially when Leclerc is going to have an engine penalty at some point based on his control electronics from Bahrain not being able to be recovered. You only get 2 of those per season, so we'll have to take another one at some point. And that's even if the first one that was replaced before the race began is still actually usable. Now, Ferrari says that they hope that it still is usable, and hopefully it will be for Leclerc's sake, and it means that he won't have to take a penalty for about, 10 or 12 races, which, okay, sure, but it's still not great, right, for Leclerc, because if that isn't recoverable, then Leclerc will be forced to take a penalty at the very first race in Saudi Arabia, or the second race in Saudi Arabia, just one race after he DNF'd at the start of the season, with not exactly the same issue that cost him the championship last season, or at least cost him a chance of fighting for it longer in the season last year, because strategy and other issues affected them, but reliability was the key reason why Ferrari weren't able to compete last year. They had the car on average until really halfway through the year, when Red Bull's race pace was just immensely much faster than what the F175 was capable of achieving. And Leclerc is obviously, after suffering through last season, is almost resigned to his fate, it feels, about the way the season might go again, and therefore has been questioning to Mr. John Elkann, of course, Ferrari president, to discuss the situation at Ferrari, because it's clearly not great over there. We did hear rumours that potentially Vasseur is going to say, you know what, Leclerc's our number one guy, he's going to have the full support. Whether that actually happens, I don't know, and even if it does happen, do they have any chance of challenging Verstappen? Probably not, but Leclerc has apparently called for a meeting with Ferrari President John Elkann. There's a good relationship there already, but seeking to share his point of view and receive some reassurance about the way Ferrari are trying to go. Charles has been very clear. He loves Ferrari. It's the team that he wants to win for, and he's had a difficult time since he's been in Formula 1 in terms of things that haven't gone his way on the track and off the track, to be honest. But now, again, the Ferrari guys are not giving him the best tools for the trade. And I mean, look, Ferrari have failed to win a championship since 2007, and the way that last season started was so promising, with Red Bull being super overweight, and after spending a lot, I'm sure, on their challenge with, Lewis Hamilton in 2021, they still won the championship, and this season Ferrari are further behind, and their car is pretty much slower than last year's, at least in terms of race pace. It was almost identical, which is basically slow when you compare that to the rest of the grid, and Charles still feels time is running out for Ferrari to deliver anything competitive. They've failed to achieve it for some time. They're clearly going to have to go through some sort of rebuild process here, right? Because we've seen what's happened there with, well, Vasseur and trying to, and many people leaving and, sending their CVs to other teams. So there's a rebuild process at Ferrari in terms of the behind-the-scenes staff. The car is behind where they need to be. Verstappen and Red Bull are just streaking away. Mercedes also in a tough spot. But, is Leclerc going to be able to win with Ferrari on this evidence, especially when the one problem they had to solve from last season, the reliability, played up again in the very first race, and Leclerc's race came to an end prematurely. So Leclerc's called for this meeting in Maranello. He's obviously worried about the situation, feels like it's pretty much unacceptable for him if the title charge is once again off the table, and obviously finished second in the championship last year, wants to take a step forward, but it's unlikely to happen this season, and he wants the reassurance from John Elkann and Ferrari that they will be able to deliver that for him over the coming years, because otherwise, why would Leclerc extend his contract with a team he might well not decide to, right? Because his contract expires at the end of 2024, so he's got this season and then next season, but at that point, who knows if Hamilton is still around? He might be, maybe the car gets better at Mercedes, but if it doesn't, Hamilton might decide, you know what, I've had enough for this. There might be a seat that opens up over there. Depending on how competitive Perez is with Verstappen as well this season, there could be a seat that opens up over there, but of course, Red Bull know what they're doing in terms of having Verstappen as their main man and Perez as the supporting car. So Leclerc probably doesn't want to get into that position, but yes, there is possibly an opportunity at Mercedes. That's not out of the realms of possibility over the next couple of years if Ferrari continue to frustrate Charles Leclerc and his world championship winning ambitions that Ferrari haven't been able to deliver on for 15, 16 years since Kimi Räikkönen in 2007, and then, before that, of course, it was the Schumacher era pretty much. And I wonder if internally Charles Leclerc was thinking, you know what, okay, last season was not ideal, but whatever, we work with it, and now the way that this season has started is probably making him think, you know what, like, is this team actually going to be able to deliver me what I want them to deliver? At some point, Leclerc might have to consider moving on. Now, what that means, though, because the situation is that Aston Martin, that Alonso is still going to probably drive for a few more years, Lance Stroll's not going anywhere, and they, alongside Mercedes and Red Bull, are probably the competitive teams. So it's not clear exactly what Leclerc could do in terms of another option, but, it's not going to happen immediately either, but his frustration is very evident, and I'm not surprised based on what's happening there internally. Even if Vasseur does say, you know what, Leclerc, you're number one man, we're going to focus on you fully, it's far from a guarantee that actually saves their season, and if they're way further behind this year than they were last year, then it's not going to give Leclerc any confidence they can close that gap going into 2024, which will be his final season with the contract that he currently has at Maranello. Also to note though, right, because it's not just Charles Leclerc that might be looking for an upgrade, it's potentially Lando Norris, right? I mean, obviously Norris, his contract expires, I believe, 2025, but let's say that Hamilton was to retire or something, I'm sure they would be interested in Norris as well, as would a lot of teams in Charles Leclerc. So tricky spot, right? But if McLaren indeed and Norris are potentially also considering parting ways, and Norris, like, at some point he's got to try and upgrade his team, because McLaren aren't going to get significantly better, I don't think, for at least a good 2-3 years. I know that people have said Norris to Red Bull, that was on the cards before. Whether Norris really wants to go to Red Bull and be alongside Verstappen, that's a question given the way that obviously Red Bull decide to operate, but still, Norris is going to look for an upgrade soon, Leclerc is probably looking for an upgrade soon, so there are serious questions at Ferrari, but Leclerc is clearly not happy with the developments, and you can't really blame him because last season started so well, and to be 12 months later in this position, I'm sure it's going to frustrate Leclerc given the optimism that he had at the start of last season after getting that Ferrari 1-2 in Bahrain, that the season was going to turn around in their favour. Just one final thing to mention here on Williams, that from 2026, they haven't yet decided on what their power unit supplier is going to be, whether they're going to stay with Mercedes, whether they might partner with Honda, or whatever other power unit options are. Obviously, there's a few of them now confirmed on the table, but yeah, pretty interesting to see, of course, that Vowles, formerly of Mercedes, might well be making a certain call relatively shortly. But very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.